Right, greetings everybody. Robin here from Courage is the Cure. It's episode 75 of Relentless. We are finally back online. So it's that time of the night where we just get on with it. So let's do that. I'll see you in a tick. Right, greetings everybody. As I said, welcome to episode 75 of Relentless. It is the 26th of September 2024. And I'm very pleased, as I said, back online, but to have this wonderful Relentless guest with me here this evening. It is Leith Masters, and she runs Crown Executive Orders, has run 38 Terra Australis grand juries, is a sheriff and lots of other wonderful things. So let me add Leith to the stage. How are you, Leith?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm competing with the bugs tonight. We've got spring upon us, and all the bugs are in my house, so they're with us tonight.
Okay. Yep, cool.
Excellent.
Excellent.
So it's a real pleasure to have you here tonight, Leith. And for people checking in, hi, I can see people watching on X, Facebook, and Rumble. Hi, everyone. This interview is quite special tonight, Leith, because a little while ago, I made an impromptu trip from Western Australia over to Melbourne because, along with Michael Gray Griffith from Cafe Lockdown, we had a 24-hour epic podcast, and we had guests across the gamut. It was politicians, activists, all sorts of people within Australia, international. Senator Malcolm Roberts. We had so many different people. Just left my mind, but Senator Malcolm Roberts was our very first guest, along with Nicola Charles, the White Rabbit. And just when the discussion started getting really interesting, because Nicola was talking about how Australia is a corporation, and Senator Malcolm Roberts had a different opinion, if you like. And unfortunately, because we had a very tight schedule on the 24-hour epic podcast, we had to move on to our next guest. So, of course, I got a whole flurry of phone calls and messages from people wanting to continue that conversation, with Malcolm or with the White Rabbit. And your name was brought up a few times, and we managed to get in touch. And here we are this evening. and the title of the show is Law of Laws, Lore of Laws, LAW. So this is a very long introduction. I'm terribly sorry, everybody.
That's right.
But I'm intrigued because this is actually something that I've been to one of the grand juries. I've been to a couple of sheriff meetings. I've watched videos, so on and so forth. But it's not a topic that I'm really on top of. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here tonight, because from the Epic podcast, people want to hear about this, and also for myself, because, as I said, I'm really not on top of all of this stuff. So all of that to say, it's great to have you here tonight, Leith.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
100%.
Yeah.
So in the description, we've got a few things that we wanted to talk about tonight. And if people have questions, you can ask them in the comments. And Leith said she's more than happy to answer questions, because I have a feeling this is going to be one of those nights where everybody's got questions. But the first thing perhaps we can start to talk about is moving the debtor to the creditor. So let's get there. Is there anything you want to preface what we say or introduce what we're about to talk about before we get to that, Leith?
Yeah, for sure. So probably the best place to start is to recognize that humanity is inside a highly structured framework. And we like to go back to, because it's really a very important starting position, 1302, which is the master trust that humanity got put into. So it all stems from there, really, as to how we became the debtor, when in actual fact we are the creditor. Because if you tune into your divine self, you know that you have inherent right to resources living on your own planet. You should not be paying for all the things that you're paying for. So really the master trust of Unum Sanctum came from the Vatican. So it's a Vatican instrument, and it spun off from the Magna Carta. So the Magna Carta of 1215, which is all are equal before the law. So that's specifically what the Magna Carta was defining, that the nobility could not have a second set of rules for itself. Otherwise, we would be in slavery. And so King John signed off at that at 1215, in the year 1215. And then in 1297, it had further developments. And then just 5 years later, the Vatican popped all of humanity and all of planet Earth into Unum Sanctum of 1302. So that put humanity into a position called guardianship, which is so critically important to understand, because when humanity is under guardianship, it doesn't have to be consulted on anything. And so that then allowed the corporate structure, which the Vatican is a corporate structure. It's a privately owned corporate structure. And even though it's all collapsing now, we have to go back and look at, well, what are we emerging out of and what are we emerging into? So this is this pivotal time on the planet of the changing of the ages, the end of Pisces and the beginning of Aquarius. So in the age of Pisces, we've been under this guardianship, which means we've basically had our rights removed. We've been deemed incompetent. And sure enough, all of this corporate structure has built these really intricate systems around us and not bothered to teach them. So in school, you didn't learn about, the current sort of structures of the UCC or, the Constitution, which is just a document that's been born out of the doctrine of discovery and other papal bulls, etc. So you've only been taught a very small amount of content that allowed you to exist within the realm of being the debtor. So being under guardianship is a nice name for slavery, basically. Someone's removed your inherent right to resources and you don't have to be consulted on things. And then along the way, the birth certificate, which really only came into play in 1837. Prior to that, it was the settlement certificate. And so you had to well, firstly, the people were given to the church to be looked after. They were deemed to be church property, and that's really still the case to this day, except for the unspent potential of humanity to wake up its consciousness and realize that all of this is fiction, and start flipping the trust and getting ourselves back into the position of the creditor, which is something that we work extensively on. So in Parliament is only writing for the debtor. So everything written through Parliament positions us to be the debtor. All of the systems are written for us to be the debtor and the customer. So like if you were to look at your electric bill, at section 1B, it's going to tell you that you're the customer, but you're not the customer, you're the custodian. And so this is, has a pivotal effect upon how the planet is functioning. And so because we're in this changing of the ages and at the end of a series of systems, including the breakdown of the Rothschilds banking system, which has run for 111 years since 1913, we're in this optimum position to be flipping everything. And of course, the Rothschilds banking system wrote the document called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars that was found in a photocopier in the 60s. So it actually says what they're going to do if they were to implode, which of course they have imploded because it's an imploding equation, and it's a privately owned. The US dollar was a privately owned currency that snuck into power on the 23rd of December in 1913. So in that document, it says if they're going to get taken out, they're going to do a genocide event, which was COVID. They would do inflation, which we've got through the roof. And we've also had a major swarm of immigration, which has caused all kinds of social problems, as well as you can now witness there's a flurry of big towers that they want to build. So they're really herding humanity into this environment where they want humanity to go up instead of out when we've got an abundance of land. And those towers are built in places where all the money would flow into the biggies, like, the Coles and Woolworths and Kmart and Big W and all that type of things.
Just a quick question there. I've already got a question. You were talking about, the 1913, the Rothschilds bank system, and if they were going to be taken out, they would do a genocide event, and we can assert that is was the COVID war. What would have alerted them to the fact that they were going to not succeed in their awful plans? What would it have been? Because it would have been obviously before the COVID war, and they had to figure that out. What would have alerted them to that?
Well, this has been a long process to take them out. As soon as the US dollar was installed, it was pretty much known that, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. So it was JFK that tried to take them out. There's that assassination. They did 9/11. That was an event to take them out as well. And so then, the Q event, or the Q movement that began. I'm an astrologer, so you have to excuse it. I speak some astrology, but it's super interesting. You want to listen to the cycles when I speak astrology. It's 2 Saturn cycles since the JFK event. Saturn's always the end of a 29 and a half year cycle, is always the end of a circuit and a structural shift. So we've had 2 Saturn cycles since JFK went out, and that's when Q really began. And then when they did 9/11, it was determined that they would have to be taken out in a much different way, or they would do another event like that. And so that's actually what was scheduled when Trump won his second round as president. They said, if you don't let Biden come in, we're going to do another 9/11. So we've had this whole story unfolding as you've been, if anyone that watches the Q drops knows that it's been a highly architected military event to remove this banking system. So it's been a long journey of getting rid of it. And of course, it owns absolutely everything. It is, we've got the foundation stone of BlackRock, and then it goes to Vanguard and onward from there. And if you look at any corporation and Google who are the top 5 investors in this mega corporation, whatever it might be, you will find that it's Vanguard and BlackRock for sure. It's and a monopoly business model is a strictly forbidden business model because it upsets the very important mechanism of supply and demand. You don't have any options with a monopoly, so we never actually really get to learn what humanity wants because it's only ever been given one choice. It might divide itself up into different outlets and look like, oh, we've got 4 different banks. Who do we want to choose from? But no, they're all just one bank, right? There's only ever been that real one bank.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the law of laws, the law, L-O-R-E, which is the livingness that comes through the First Nation people, and we're all First Nation, we've all come from somewhere. They've got a very long history of moving humanity around the planet. We've just had this huge influx of, immigrants from all around the planet. There's people moving because they keep moving everyone. So it is the living. We all have the same rights, inherent rights to be on the planet. And then laws, L-A-W-S, is land, air, water, spirit. So it's the law, the living, looking after the land, air, water, spirit, of which we all are. Because, of course, Mother Earth is a living being in her own right, and she has needs, and the waters have needs, and the crops and the trees and all of that. So by having humanity tend to nature, we stay in balance with it, which is why if you look at the original map of Terra Australis, before the framework of the Commonwealth system, which has also been violated, laid itself over the top of, you can see that it's, so many tiny little tribes all looking after specific areas, because then they live and breathe and know this land and this landscape and the seasons and the cycles. So we're actually really tending to Mother Earth.
Yeah.
And so then in comes this legal system. So when we have this legal system, which is what is managing the guardianship that we're all inside of, that calls itself law. You got to remember that if it's prepared to do a genocide event, which it has and does often, there's no bounds to how much this system will lie. So a legal system is a subset of law, and we call it a subset because it violates the free will and informed consent of humanity, meaning it can go along and do whatever it wants and position us however it wants, because we're under this guardianship. So again, you can see the power of the guardianship, or we don't have to consult them. And so you want to be mindful that the birth certificate as an instrument, we call it an instrument, is actually a receipt for the corporation to have use of the resources and to build things that the corporation wants without having to consult you, because you're under guardianship and you're classified as incompetent, and you're made to be incompetent because you're not taught anything in school. 12 years in school, you never learned anything about law. That was when we had COVID come through. Nobody knew how to protect themselves. They had no working knowledge or dialogue around law.
Yes.
So humanity is managed by maxim of law. So maxim of law is timeless, energetic fields of a yin and yang, negative, positive polarity, right? Because everything in this dimension is a polar reality. The third dimension is a polar reality. So if you do something like all are accountable for their actions, then when you violate that, we have something like COVID unfold, where the corporation has stepped in and said, you have to tell the people below you that if they don't get the jab, they're going to lose their job and so forth. And it trickled down through the corporate infrastructure and threatened everybody. But if humanity was in the right position and was actually functioning in law, enough people would have been able to say, and let's hope we're at that position now if they ever tried to do it again, enough people would go, oh, no. All are equal before the law. That's a maxim of law. All are accountable for their actions. That's a maxim of law. And so then when we write the grand juries, so we've done 38 grand juries now. We started on the equinox of 2021, and we write a grand jury every full moon. So we've written over 650 orders now. We write for us being the creditor, whereas Parliament just writes for us being the debtor. So we write a very hefty list now of very serious and expensive fines for those that move against maxims of law. If they say, oh no, we can do this to you and we can do that to you, we can issue fines to you, we can cut your electricity off. For cutting off electricity, it used to be $100,000 penalty notice from the grand jury, but in the grand jury that we just did this month on the 18th, the grand jury decided to put those fines up to $250,000 if you cut someone off from essential right to resources, because you have inherent right to essential resources. You are water, 80% water. The planet's 80% water. So who are you paying for water? And the birth certificate is the tool that has been monetized onto the Securities and Exchange Commission that generates all the revenue or the currency, remembering that all forms of money are just fiction. And so we've already paid for all the infrastructure that delivers the water, that delivers the electricity.
I know one question comes up, and I know a few people have asked this, myself included, because we see a lot of, when I say we, I mean people that engage in social media, particularly over the past 4 years, when people want to talk about birth certificates, so on and so forth, can we see where that's being monetized? Are we able to see that? Because as of yet, I know that keeps coming up with people. With how do we find that? How do we find that out about ourselves?
Well, it's monetized. Yeah, you can look at the UCC. I mean, it goes through the Uniform Commercial Code, because there's only one government. There's not like a government of Australia. Yeah, there's only one global government. And that started at the end of World War II, which ended in September of 1945. The United Nations began in October of 1945. So we've got to question that, right? Of course. And at the end of the Second World War was Operation Paperclip, which dispersed all of the pharmaceutical, which now gave us the COVID. And so you have to say, well, why didn't Australia have a referendum before it became a founding signatory to the United Nations? Well, it didn't, because Australia is a fictional commercial framework that's a global arm that sits over the top of Australia. And it deals with the public and the person, which then it fails to speak of joinder. So people think, oh, I'm the public. We're always processed as the Public Health Act. But we're not the public and we're not the person. So how they manage all of that with the birth certificate and monetizing it is through the Uniform Commercial Code, right? So the UCC. And that's how you can declare that you're the creditor. Not to say that it's necessarily acknowledged when you do that through UCC1. Your birth certificate number, is a QSIP number, as Rex is putting up there. So all of the instruments that we use to move around in society, Medicare cards, driver's licenses, car registrations, bank loans, everything is monetized and securitized. Mortgages, mortgages go into a tranche and then are floated on the stock market, and only for institutional investors, because it's a really safe investment, because people are generally going to pay their mortgage or they're going to lose their house. So the big institutions come in and they generate the superannuation and insurance and all that sort of thing. So it's really just feeding itself. We're paying for our own prison. And of course, something like a mortgage everything is a promissory note, especially when there's money changing hands. It's all a promissory note. So there's going to be no other signature on the mortgage. A mortgage fails all 8 essentials of a valid contract, meaning there's no transparency, there's no meeting of the minds, there's no valid consideration, meaning the bank didn't give you something and then you go and work for 30 years to pay it back. They didn't give you anything. You signed
Yep.
a promissory note, and then you go and work for 30 years and pay back these fictional digits in a computer. And so that is the whole system is a fraud, a total fraud. And then it calls itself law. So people are constantly arguing with this system and expecting to get law out of it and going to the courts and thinking that the courts are courts of law. But they're not courts of law. They're just courts of banking. It's just all commerce. So essentially, humanity is run by a giant commercial corporate machine. And so we call that the dead, right? Because corporations is classified as the dead. It has no breath in it. We can divide between the breath and the no breath. And so we say breath is superior jurisdiction and no breath is inferior jurisdiction. So it's superior jurisdiction, the living. We don't argue with inferior jurisdiction. We just give it instructions that it has to follow. There's no point arguing, right? So humanity's been trained to be in controversy, to be in battle, all that type of stuff. And so that is a distraction away from being able to recognize the true framework that we're sitting in, where the creditor would show up, which we call the executor and beneficiary in the commercial world. And you come in and manage your estate, your inherent right to your estate, which everybody has. And because you went under guardianship, the state is managing your estate, right? And you're under guardianship and you don't know that, and you haven't been trained, you haven't been told any of that type of stuff. And then you go out and spend your life working to live. And now the more things that we allegedly need, like 20 odd years ago, there wasn't mobile phones, there wasn't internet, there wasn't $60,000, $70,000 cars. So now everyone's working at horrendous hours per day. The kids are farmed off in every direction. You know, you've got daycare, preschool, primary school, there's a kindy in there, high school. So there's this separation of the family unit, separation away from the mother role, the feminine role, and then the disorientation of the male role that's around that. So we're just totally farmed in every way. We are farmed, and that's what big pharma is. We are in the farm. We are the cattle in the farm. And if you were to go to, it's the merchant lords, the pirates on the high seas of the holy sea, right? We're in the holy sea. So in that macabre story that the Vatican spun was that we're all lost at sea, and, you know, then you get docked and birthed and barcoded, and you're chattel slave from that point forward. You can go forward at any time and say, I've woken up and I'm claiming my estate. But because the corporate machine now is so big and cumbersome, and humanity has been terribly dumbed down, terribly trapped, a lot of people would not move against the state because they've got a mortgage and they need food in their fridge, and they've got kids, and maybe one person is awake and the other partner is not, and that explodes relationships really quickly. And if one individual wakes up in a family unit and the other ones have not woken up, that's a recipe for a disaster in that family unit.
Yeah.
So, you know, essentially we need to know the framework that we're sitting in, which is guardianship. We're at the end of the Age of Pisces, which is a 2,000-year age when we're talking about the precession of the equinox. We're going into the Age of Aquarius, which is another 2,000 years. If we look at from the time of Unum Sanctum, we've had 3 Pluto returns, right? So Pluto has an orbit of 248 years. It's our most outer orb. So when it makes a move, it's really important. So the first lap that it did from Unum Sanctum, we got given the Poor Laws by Henry VIII. So you can go and look at your passport today, open it up, look under type, and you will see that you've got a P there because you're the poor, right? The next time it came around, 248 years, we had the Declaration of Independence in the US, but that was not real, right? They've been paying taxes right up until very recently. They were not free from England at all. Now we've done another 248 years. So now we're lined up with the end of the Age of Pisces plus 3 Pluto returns. So we're truly birthing in the Age of Aquarius. And what is the Age of Aquarius? It's about humanity self-governing itself. So now if we go to a smaller cycle, still talking about Pluto, when Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008, so Pluto being our most outer orb, its job is to destroy that which does not serve. It creates irreconcilable change. So in 2008, the first thing it did was, boom, blow up the financial system, right? We've got the global financial crisis in 2008.
Yep.
So we've been traveling through all of that, through all of this time, because it's been in Capricorn for 15 years. Now, on October 11, that's just coming, October 11, Pluto has gone into Aquarius and it's gone retrograde for its last time into Capricorn, which is that. So we're nailing the coffin shut right now. All that's happening is we're nailing this power structure that's privately owned. We're nailing it shut. So in terms of a timeline and wanting to feel like, oh God, what's happening? Are we really at the end? Yes, yes. Hold that energy. We are at the end. Nail it shut. So on October 11, it will move forward, or it'll move out of the retrograde position and to the last little section of Capricorn. And by November 20th, it will be in Aquarius for the next 20 years. So then we got to say to ourselves, okay, well, it blew up that whole power structure. Now it's going to blow up humanity even more in terms of what humanity has been existing like. But so long, the beauty of astrology is that you get to be the driver of the car. So when we say, okay, if Pluto is bringing irreconcilable change to humanity via the energy of Aquarius, what do we want to create? We can drive what Pluto will do so long as we know where it is and what it is doing. Well, we do know where it is and we do know what it's doing. And we also know that we're coming out of guardianship and into humanitarianism. So we've got all the crossover of the financial system. We've got humanitarian projects on the table. We've got the creditor coming forward. Yep.
So we've just had, sorry to interrupt you, Leith. I'm fascinated, actually. Absolutely fascinated. We've just had Sam. Hi, Martine. How you going, love? We've just had Sam talk, referencing Jordan Maxwell, and I've been a watcher of Jordan for, I don't know, 15, 20 years now. And when I knew I was going to be speaking to you, I went back to Jordan to listen to some of his interviews that he's done. And he was talking about, of course, Age of Aquarius, because that's where we're at right now in our conversation here. And he was talking about, the span of each age, Pisces, Aquarius, and that moving into, when the Age of Aquarius actually starts, his thoughts are that it's 300 years, because he was saying something like, is it 2,150 years, something like that is for each age. So I'm just, I'm not trying to be nitpicky, but just for people, because I'm sure people who have more information about this than I do, are we right now, we're in the moving stages into the Age of Aquarius, is that why we've got our fundamental elements seem to be under attack? Or is that just me being tinfoil hat person?
No, not tinfoil hat at all. Absolutely not. That is totally accurate. The Mayan culture gave us the precession of the equinox. It was that consciousness way back then that was able to map all of that 2,160 years by, watching the sky and all the rest of it. And, that's a totally valid cycle to be watching. And any cycle that's of any kind of length, even a Saturn return that's only 29 and a half years, takes 2 years to integrate. So you can imagine how long it takes to integrate something like a 2,160 year shift out of a mutable Pisces energy where everything's fuzzy and the spirituality's all been kind of snatched up by the Vatican, moving into then a fixed air sign where we're much more solid and like, okay, what's going on here? And is everybody okay? Because, Aquarius is the 11th sign of all of them. So it's got a really big focus on the health of all of humanity. So, Yeah,
And for people that aren't, I mean, I dare say that, a fair few of our viewers tonight on the live and also on the replay, I'm just speaking for myself. As far as astrology, all I see about astrology is, the rubbish that the kitty litter, outlet newspapers will put, on some page just to fill a space. When I was a young person, a young lady, I did read a little bit about astrology, and through my awakening, I guess, through the 2000s, I've seen some videos. But just could you talk to the audience about, you just mentioned there Saturn integrating and all those sorts of things. How relevant is astrology and these motions and these movements and the integrations of the planets you're talking? How can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, sure. It is 100% relevant. Astrology is basically the engine equivalent of an engine in a car. For spirit, for consciousness, you've got to think of yourself that you're basically a human body form walking around with spirit infused in you, so it's spirit having a human experience. Most people have heard that saying. And so you've got to think, well, how does that all happen? There's mechanics involved as to how does spirit get itself here into a human form, and how does this human form hold itself together at a molecular level and then disperse itself at death, go back into ashes to ashes, dust to dust. That's all mathematical equations. So the planets and the alignments that they're making to themselves are all mathematical equations. So you are a mathematical configuration. So at the time that you're born and you get your birth chart, that is the mathematical configuration that you're walking around in, that gives you all the subpersonalities that you might have in your life. And then the sky keeps moving. And so it is influencing points. Like when Saturn does a 29.5 return to itself, it's going to cause a 100% shedding of the psychology. That is simply what happens at a Saturn return. And a half Saturn return, that's why teenagers at 14, 15, 16 at a half Saturn return are a nightmare, because it's all about authority. So they're always bashing up against authority as they try to find their way forward. How much authority do I have? How much can I push the envelope? Am I going to end up in the lockup? All that type of thing. But the energy field, you've got to think of the planets as holding these energetic frequencies that have been born and morphed through billions of years. Without the orbs out there holding these particular energy frequencies, we would not exist in this form. And you've got to think that we are all recorders. We're recording consciousness. That is what we are doing. And when the body dies and goes back from ashes to ashes, dust to dust, it is the consciousness that lives on back out into the Akashic records and out into the energetic field. And because everything comes from this one divine pulse in the beginning, everything is connected through these fibers, these etheric fibers. That's why we can have the psychic realms. That's why we can say, gosh, I haven't spoken to Joe for a while. And then the next day, oh, hi, Joe. God, I was just thinking about you yesterday, because it's all traveling along the cyber fields, right? So we're all connected. So we have incredible power, which is why they like to keep us separated so that we don't connect. They like to infuse the frequency so that we can't find stuff. So you've got to get through that frequency. That's why eating really clean and living a really clean life is incredibly important in this day and age, just to be able to get through the field that they're constantly bombarding with masses of sugar. And now we've got the 5G towers, and you've got your phone all the time, and we've got lots of drama and prices all the time.
What are they so afraid of? What is it about us that they're so afraid of? Why do they have to bombard us like this?
Well, because there was a quest made, right, with the fallen angels. They made a quest that they could do it without God. They were cast out, and they said, oh, we can do it without God. But that's not really true. They can't do it without God, because there is only one divine spark. So part of the way that the fallen angels operate is to succubus, like a parasite, off us and keep us dumbed down. I mean, there's multiple levels of it for a start. So there's that level. Then we have outer beings like the Anunnaki that came to come and get the gold. So they are still here. That's why gold mining is such a huge thing. They turned humanity into slaves to mine the gold for them. But of course, our consciousness can't be contained. It cannot be contained. Sure, in this life, there might be people that never wake up. You might have 100 lifetimes where you never wake up, but then you'll have a lifetime where, boom, I'm awake. I'm not a slave. I'm not going to put up with that. I'm not going to be enclosed in that system. And so when I talk about enclosure, all the instruments that they use are forms of enclosure, because in that unum sanctum trust that everything went into, in order for you to get to your resources, you have to use an instrument to get them. They've basically put all the resources behind the instrument. Then when you use the instrument, like a birth certificate or a driver's license, you shed your sovereignty through not, I don't want to say ignorance. It is ignorance, but it's willful ignorance that they have derived. They've purposefully not told the structure. So when you use their instrument, you suddenly are beholden to the statute and legislation that is attached to that instrument, which is to say you've got to pull over for an RBT, or we're the cops at the side of the road, we're going to tell you to get out of the car and you better get out of it, or we're going to yank you out. We become beholden to this legal system that calls itself law, but it's not law, it's a legal system. And, we've lost our sovereignty, but in any moment you can claim your sovereignty back. And we do that by taking the position of the executor and beneficiary. And then what happens to the board of the guardians, this is critically important to recognize. When you become the executor and beneficiary, so you move out of being the chattel slave, the board of the guardians have to become the trustees. That is how we flip the trust. So then one of the key board of the guardians is, of course, the judiciary, right? So when you go to a magistrate's court, which is a summary judgment court, you cannot be seen and you cannot be heard. You are totally processed as a chattel slave. That's why writing an affidavit before you ever go to a court is critically important, because the chances of your word being heard inside a court when you're being processed as a chattel slave is extremely remote. Whereas if you've got an affidavit filed, you can say, excuse me, magistrate, point 10 on my affidavit, I've said the following. So, it's a whole game of commerce and a whole game of trickery.
I just want to go, I don't know if I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but just going back to something you said a few minutes ago about having many lives and, perhaps for, however many of those it might be, and then, one particular life you wake up. How do I ask my question? I'm intrigued because I've been watching some really interesting interviews, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are about, having many lives, and then how do we end up here? Because have we chosen to, if we did, how come we have a complete mind wipe and we don't learn from our previous lives, and we end up in a situation where, we've been talking about being under guardianship and all these sorts of things, we're incompetent, we're fenced in literally, might be digitally now, but still literally, into this form of slavery. And just think about how did that happen, Leith? What are your thoughts there? Because we come here with no instructions, no one tells us why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing, what we learned before. We have a complete mind wipe, and it can continue on for many, many lives, and people don't know. But yeah, how did we get here? How did that happen? I didn't elect to be in this shit show, I can tell you now.
Well, the truth of it is you actually did elect, because there's only free will. You have free will, And it can only be overcome if you don't know that you have free will, and then you actually give it away unknowingly, which is how people were accosted through the COVID. But,
Yeah.
you know, in the big galactic realm, this galaxy is classified as, you know, somewhat of a young galaxy and a young consciousness that's going through many changes to develop itself. There's certainly, you know, much more advanced worlds, but the human is a highly developed individual. And, you know, prior I saw Nettie, if that's how you're saying your name, forgive me if I've said it incorrectly, saying, you know, that the fallen angels is a myth. You know, everything is a myth. The reality is that energy is here on this planet, and in this dimension, it's in a polar reality of negative, positive, and that's how everything is moving forward. So at every single point of every single day, you are making a decision. If I go this way, that's going to happen, and that won't happen. If I go that way, that's not going to happen, but this will. And that is the power of free will. So although there's all these rules and energetic frequencies on planet Earth, you have this free will that is the divine creator source in the human body. That's why it's called the creator, because at every moment you are creating. Right. And that's this unspent potential to create. That's a fabulous potential. So when you can see through these enclosures that are fictional or that violate the inherent rights and inherent laws, that's where you can come unstuck. But it's very liberating to know all of that you have this huge unspent potential, and that a lot of what is perceived as real is not actually real at all. And so that is the waking up process. And sometimes if I give like a really macabre example of a life where, say, someone is brutally murdered, and, you know, we all grieve for that individual perhaps, but at the same time, in another realm of that reality, we can say, well, that individual has just dropped their physical form in this lifetime. It was a savage end. They might have experienced immense terror or whatever might be the case, but that physical form has just, it's just snuffed out. It'll go back into ashes to ashes, dust to dust, but the spirit is free and can look in and go, whoa, okay, well, that wasn't a very fun life. I don't think I'll come back for one of those again. But it'll come back again for something else. And you're also coming back because you're just like the leaves on a tree. So your mother was a leaf, your grandmother was a leaf, your great-grandmother was a leaf. So just as you're inheriting their eyes or their mouth, you're also inheriting their energetic pathways that they may have not resolved from past lives, which is why we call it karma. You know, you might go to a place on the planet and find that your relative left some really bad karma and you're coming to clean it up. And in this consciousness, you might not be completely aware of that, but that is what is going on.
What about, you know, you were just talking about breaking free of the fictional laws, and, you know, it's liberating, and, you know, I agree with that 100%. Breaking free of those fictional laws and the barriers and so on and so forth. How do we explain? I mean, you touched on there that somebody has an awful demise and those sorts of things, but how, you know, if we think that we choose to come here, have a complete mind wipe, and, you know, our whole existence, whether or not we're talking about, you know, law of laws, or just a psychopath down the road who does awful things to you repeatedly while you're a child, or, you know, all of the awful suffering that happens in the world. How do we explain that? You know, if we choose to come here, have a complete mind wipe, and elect to suffer in this world in this manner, whether it's under these fictional laws. We live a pretty privileged life in a country like Australia compared to some other nations. You know, that's not to say that awful things don't happen to people. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that. You know, why would we choose to come here, have a complete mind wipe, and then be just, you know, bombarded with all this rubbish and be suffering all of the time?
Because it is it presents us with the unspent potential of what we could become. Because whenever we're in a comfortable position, we tend to not grow and learn as much as when we are in an uncomfortable position. So the benefits of something like COVID, which is, many people would say, really, there's benefits to it, really? And we would say, well, yeah, look at the emergence of everyone that wants to know about law now. That's why it's called the Great Awakening. It's only by being really pressurized that the whole of the consciousness of humanity on planet Earth has now emerged into a whole new dimension. So, when we were talking about the fallen angels before, or we might talk about the devil and the cabal, we actually manifest these types of pressure points for ourselves to create this growth experience where we have to then decide, no, we don't want that. We're going to move on from that. So as we move into the age of Aquarius, this 20 years that we're going into where Pluto is in Aquarius, we now have this juxtaposition of everything that we don't want from coming out of guardianship. And, it's going to take a long time to get out of guardianship, but the beauty is the faster the consciousness comes to terms with that and wakes up and actually has a working knowledge of that, the faster we're going to reinvent the landscape to how we want it. And in thinking that, just 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't an internet. Can you imagine trying to spread this kind of knowledge, back in those days? So now we have this huge potential to be able to create radical change, hold huge accountability to law, and create a much different planet for ourselves. So, we grow through. Go.
Amazing. So I guess combining two of the points there, we've been talking about the Age of Aquarius and escaping the guardianship. I guess, what does it look like how do we do that? What does it look like to escape the guardianship? And then moving into the Age of Aquarius, what does that look like as well? Because Jordan Maxwell comes top of mind, Miss Jean-Pierre. He has a really grim description of that, to be honest. So what does that look like when we are moving towards escaping this guardianship and moving towards, the Age of Aquarius?
Okay. So one would be in a healthier place to not refer to it as escaping, because our birth certificate, so our energy field that has been monetized through the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, that has already built all of the systems, and many of the systems are really efficient systems. It's just that the guardianship has their hands on all the levers, right? So if you decide that you don't want to pay your electric bill, they're going to cut you off. And that causes a huge problem. But the system itself of delivering electricity to all the houses is a very efficient system, and we own that. So this is the critical turning point where humanity steps forward and says, oh, we're not under guardianship anymore. We're actually in charge and in control. And within our systems, you cannot do this anymore. And that is what we write in the grand juries. We write extensively. We've done 650 orders. You can't do this. You can't do that. If you do this, we're going to do that to you. If you do that, we're going to do all of this. So you also have to, like, if we give an example, say the roads, which are classified as public roads, but we're not the public, right? The public is a piece of paper. That's all it is. So every road is a public road and a private road. So theoretically, you should be able to drive on the private roads as a private individual without being accosted by the police, who are the policy officers of the corporation. Now we're coming through lots of phases right now, and they're very violent, and there's lots of frontline workers that get caught up in the violence as they're breaking through. We're literally breaking through these systems where you might be saying, I'm not paying my electric, I'm paying it via the bills of exchange, 1909 bills of exchange. You should be able to send in a promissory note and your bill is paid, recognized as paid on the creditor ledger. But the creditor ledger is missing. Only the debtor ledger is there. So when breaking through all of these types of things, I mean, you might have heard of, for example, the Royal Registry that started to do the private plates through the Royal Registry. That resulted in some people being accosted at the side of the road by police. That's now had a relatively successful court case go through with it. So we're breaking open the monopoly, because the entire thing is a monopoly, as I said before, and that's a forbidden business model. And so one of the key things that is this thing called joinder. So if I give the analogy of the game of Monopoly, which is a gazette, so all of Hollywood and its movies, most of its movies are gazettes telling you the system that you're in. Monopoly as a board game is a gazette, right? So you're moving your token around the board game. The bank always can make more money, and the bank usually wins, and your token can go to jail. So they're giving you this gazette, but what they don't tell you is that the living you, the non-corporate you, is strapped to that token that's moving around the Monopoly board. Right now, that renders everything to be null and void, because that's a failure of the 8 essentials of a valid contract, that there must be transparency. So there's no transparency. So everything is actually rendered null and void in that system. And we can keep what we want and we can discard what we don't want. Yeah, we want our electricity infrastructure to be running. We want our water infrastructure to be running. Because we are the custodians of the planet, we are the ones that authorize all payments. No problem. We'll pay all the public servants to do their jobs. No problem. You keep our beautiful systems running. That's a fantastic job that you're doing. But you want to try and disconnect me or be brutal or break your own codes, which they do all the time, because we've been doing a 2+ year audit on the essential resources, and it's so violent. So we write for them and say, you can't do this and you can't do that anymore. So, you know, it's not about escaping it. It's about reinventing it and then using the resources so that they make a better sense. Like, it would be good for us to think about, okay, if I wasn't working 5 or 6 or 7 days a week for, 8 or 9 or 10 days, 10 hours, what would I be doing? And of course, back in the day, we had music and we had cooking, home cooking, growing our own food, which was pure and healthy. What would we be doing if we weren't pushing pieces of paper around in tall buildings for stupid infrastructure? Like, if we were all just sending a promissory note to the electric company, would it have a whole accounting department that's calling people saying, you're late for your bill, sending out emails saying you need to pay us? All of that is fiction. It's total fiction. We should be doing just an audit on these resource, accounting systems. Go, okay, in this quarter, the population of Terra Australis, we've used this much electricity. Do you see what I'm saying? So everything can be simplified.
Yep. It's I can see in the comments a lot of people are onto this. A lot of wonderful comments. There's a couple of questions that I'd like to bring up. We've got Rachel. Rachel's asking, so why should I pay my mortgage? Because the world doesn't work to help the little person. I know this came up. I did a live stream for Rod Cullerton and Len Harris, the former senators, and they were talking about, land and so on and so forth. And this question came up as well. I think people become maybe a little bit despondent, or, why should I pay these awful, nasty people? What would you say there, Leith?
Well, it's good to get your consciousness into recognizing the framework of the corporation, the dead entity that has taken up the running of humanity, which we never agreed to that. We were put into unum sanctum without our permission. So the corporate crown, which comes through papal bulls like Eterni Regis, the eternal crown, which we could interpret really as the eternal administration system, which, yes, we do need an administration system when there's 25 million of us and 8 billion of us now. It's great to have those administration systems, but it's not the ruler. And so all of that colonialism that brought with it the corporation, that's all corporation. It's not people, it's corporate. And then it laid over its framework of the titles, and then to the titles upon the land, which just totally swamped all the First Nation boundaries, the natural boundaries that had been existing for thousands and thousands of years. And then to those titles, they attach things like mortgages and say, oh, well, you know, you want your little inherent right to resources, your inherent right to have land and shelter. We're going to attach a mortgage to it and you'll have to pay it. And if you don't pay it, we're going to take that back from you. That's why you shouldn't be paying it. And that's why that system is collapsing. And the more that people know that it's collapsing, and you make moves to, you know, communicate effectively and do maybe UCC or the executor and beneficiary, the faster we move out of it. We are the ones driving the movement into the age of Aquarius. So the faster the consciousness wakes up and starts navigating our administration system from the position of the executor and beneficiary instead of the position of the slave, the better. You know, we have multiple court cases going on all the time, and any court case that goes to court now is now complex. It's not that you just turn up and get railroaded by the magistrates and the judges. No. It's all about, hang on, I'm coming as the executor and you're the trustee now, so I need you to do this, this, and this for me. So the judiciary is learning how to be the trustee, and some of them are good and lots of them are really bad. But if you show up as an incompetent trustee at the bench because the executor has arrived and has sent in all their paperwork and affidavit and so forth first, an incompetent trustee is fined $333,000 and given a penalty notice. And then if they do it a second time, it's $666,000, and they can be fired and deemed an incompetent trustee. So, you know, just last week, an incompetent trustee in one of our country towns wrote an order for the Department of Child Protection to steal 2 children. That was a total failure of lawful due process. So lawful due process is a critical, precise framework that's very, very simple. And the framework is that the claimant must prove their claim. The defendant must be heard. It must be before a competent court, and only then can something be determined. So for a magistrate to write an order for the DCP, a department that's running humanity, to go and snatch 2 children, we can fire that magistrate, no problem, say guilty of slavery, you violated lawful due process, you believe you've got powers you haven't got, you've put those children into a position of slavery, and you've let this department come and snatch them out of another institution called a school, right? So the schools are also complicit in harboring this type of behavior. So the more that we have our framework, and the framework and language of law is very, very simple, very simple. Legislation is the complex mess and the games that get played in the court system. Right. But, you know, if you were to just hold lawful due process up to any kind of equation, say, oh, you've made a claim, you better prove it. The defendant all too often goes into defending themselves, and they actually drive their own case down a nightmare hole. If you just were quite silent about it and let the claimant prove their claim, often the claim doesn't even exist. It's just complete fabricated crap. And then as soon as something like so the director of public prosecution steps in, then we're paying for we, the people, are paying for a government department to prosecute us. I mean, if that is not a self-fulfilling system of slavery, I don't know what is. And then they go to jail because of the joinder, where people haven't separated the living, breathing superior jurisdiction from the chattels, from the token, the commercial you, the all capitals name you. Then the real person goes to jail, right?
Absolutely nuts. You know, and we've had people say in the comments that you know your stuff, and you know, I think this is just my assertion. A lot of the audience right now, I would say, knows this instinctively. We might not be able to articulate it. We may not know, particularly, you know, I mean, you just said law with legislation was, you know, pricking somebody's ass. That's my expression. You didn't say that, but that's what I gathered. You know, we instinctively know this, and I don't think a lot of people can articulate it, nor, you know, people are time poor. They don't have time to look into this, do research. I mean, the wealth of knowledge that you have, I mean, I would assert has taken you years and years and years to acquire, you know, and being very diligent and dedicated. But I can see from the comments here that people know this instinctively, and I can actually see some relief in people's comments here that you are articulating it so beautifully for people that have been thinking it. We've just got one more here from beautiful Mark, wonderful follower here at Courage is Cure and Cafe Locked-Out. I don't know what this is.
Sister KV Trust.
Yes. Do
Yeah.
you? Okay,
yeah, sure. There's many along the way, but it's particularly when, back to that Vatican story, they created the story that we were lost at sea. And so the state is holding your estate for you until you show up. And most people don't know that they need to show up, because once again, you've not been told anything, because how do we keep them in a position of being incompetent? We won't tell them anything. We won't tell them the architecture that we've built around them.
What do you mean show up?
Well, because when we go back to 1302, you think about what life would have been like in 1302, the 1400s, 1500s. In the Age of Pisces and Age of Water, we've explored the planet by sea. So it's not hard for people to go missing out in the sea, and the Holy Sea is what has been running the planet. So you could be anywhere on the planet and nobody know where you are, and that you have inherent right to resources. And so then the state will take your resources. And then, you know, imagine the education back in those centuries as well. They're not going to go, oh, I need to go to the state and tell them that I'm here and that I have inherent right to land, and, you know, I'll have some ducks over there and grow my crop and build my hut. And, you know, it used to be that the peasants had free use of the land on the Lord's land until the Erection Cottages Act came in 1535, and then you had to start paying for things. So, you know, we're in a time that's called the War of the Lords. And we would say, well, what lords are we talking about? And we would say the landlords. And so then we would say, well, who are the real landlords? And the real landlords are those with breath. So we differentiate between you know, breath and non-breath. And I'll show you something quickly. So I'll just grab it. Yep. So through executive orders, and the website is executiveorders.life, we have what we call the sovereign identity card. So this is you as a sovereign. You can go on there, and it's in the top menu under SSID. That's a card. You can buy them. It's $55. It's a solid card. It has, I can't hardly get it in the focus. And it has got some critical links onto the website, which have critical documents like the creditor's ledger. But if I give you an example, just say you went to Centrelink, right? And they're going to say to you at the counter, oh, have you got some ID? So you give them the driver's license that you get from the state, and that will turn the machine on for you that's going into your trust. But then you would also say, oh, and by the way, I'm just here as executor and beneficiary today. I'm just managing my trust for myself, just so that you know it's on the record. You don't have to do any much explaining, because you're going to be explaining it to someone that's relatively clueless and doesn't want to hear and isn't trained to hear. But these days now, as the sovereign comes forward, you know, you'd be mad not to be carrying an ID that at the side of the road you could go, no, actually, I'm here as the sovereign, and I'm not I'm not subjected to your statutes and legislations, which is only applying to the all capitals name, which is not me. You don't want to give up your all capitals name necessarily at this point in time, because that is the key into the trust where your resources are sitting. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right. So there's okay.
I'm thrilled to see Molly here. Hi, Molly. Yes, absolutely. Can you just say your website again there one more time so I can put it up?
Executiveorders.life. executive-orders.life. So we write the orders of the executor.
Life or
Whereas
live?
Life,
Life?
Life. Yeah. Whereas Parliament writes, that's it, executive-orders.life. Thanks, Georgie Porgy. The Parliament is only writing for us to be the debtor. And like at our West Australian Parliament, it actually lives at 4 Harvest Terrace, because all it is doing is harvesting.
That's a sick joke, Leith. That's not true.
There's sick
You're
joke.
pulling my leg.
It is true. It is true. You Google the address. There's sick jokes everywhere because they have to keep gazetting everything and telling you the system that you're in so that they don't get the karma. But it's most people walking around with blinkers on. They're really busy. They've been trained now to have a 5-second attention span. It's all in their phone. They don't know what's going on. Easy pickings. Oh, let's release another pandemic. They've got no clue. We haven't taught them anything. We've been feeding them bullshit for years. They have no hope. And we had no hope. It's been billions, millions and millions of people that have either died or been severely injured or sterilized. We're yet to see when all our teenagers in high school get to 30 and they all want to have a kid, and suddenly they find out that they can't have a baby because they just got sterilized, right?
Right. Yep.
Vicious.
Absolutely. Grow up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What a fascinating conversation, Leith. I've got to say, I still have a mountain of questions. I'd love to have you back on again to continue this conversation. I know from the comments this evening, people would really like to have you back on to talk about this some more. That's a lot for anybody that's just watched the show and has never heard any of that before. Nothing about it. That's really a lot.
It's a
actually.
Lot.
It's a real lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you'd like to come back, maybe we can kind of unpack things or do all those sorts of things. Because like I said, if people have never had any of those words, concepts, ideas enter their brain before, that's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
is.
And before we wind up, which seems like we're going to wind up in a minute, inside Unum's sanctum were multiple papal bulls, which are rules made by the Vatican to separate out the mind, body, and the spirit, and disenfranchise humanity. And you can put all that back together, boom, just like that. And then came the Doctrine of Discovery of 1493, and that just ended last year, 530 years. And you've got to say, oh, why? Why did that just end? 530 years of pillaging all the First Nation tribes, right? They were looking for the old resources, the old technologies from the crash of Atlantis. So when you put your consciousness into thinking even, 722 years back to Unum Sanctum, most people get stuck at the Constitution. Oh, let's get the Constitution back into place. It's like you have to accommodate the First Nation tribes. They're critically important. Ontario Australia's First Nation tribes are never going to say, oh, yeah, let's go under the Constitution. That is never going to happen. They have law, L-O-R-E, that is thousands of years old, and they're not corporations. So that is a pointless place to put yourself, is to be saying, let's get the Constitution back into place. Everyone is moving back into LORE and the management of the land, air, water, spirit. And then the corporations, we created them, so we're running them. They're beholden to us. They're our tools. They're our assets. And so it's up to us to get our heads around, okay, how am I doing that? Am I now showing up as an executive that says, I'm here, I want to help. How do I do it? What do I need to do? That is where we're at. Yeah, common law. It's true, Peter. Common law. Yep.
It's I think it's, I mean, even for somebody like me, because not only do a lot of us just work in a defensive manner and a reactionary manner, something's happening and we just, we react to that, and And then, I don't have much faith in politics. I think it's two cheeks of the same ass. But, you've got people that really, and I do see, anyway, it doesn't matter what I think, validity in trying to change the current system that we exist in, to make our lives better and our children's lives and our grandchildren and all those sorts of things. This is really, you hear this phrase all the time, one of those wanky phrases, taking our power back. And essentially that's what I've got from tonight, is taking our true human nature power back. We are not beholden to them. We are not their slaves. We were not born that way. We might have been enslaved and been deemed incompetent, but we are not. And whichever way people want to look at it, I mean, tonight is another show of us taking our power back. And that's really how I see the crux of this conversation tonight, Leith. And I think it's aside from it's separate from, as I mentioned before, the people that want to change the current political system, or, as you mentioned, get back to the Constitution, or all these sorts of things. This is about us, human nature, human beings. We are not beholden to anybody else. Is that fair to say, what I've got out from tonight?
That is fair to say. You're only beholden to maxim of law, which is do no harm to others. There's a handful of maxims of law that will run everything really perfectly. Things like corporate immunity are what we call a legal fiction, a complete myth. It's not real. Corporate immunity, the corporation cannot protect you. We can come and get you in a blink of an eye if you move against us, no problem, because we're in maxim of law. I did see that Baku, if I'm saying that correctly, has said mention Wednesday night workshop. So if you want more of this type of content and learning, we have a Wednesday night workshop at 5:30 Australian Western Standard Time, and it is on, you find the purple button on the menu of executiveorders.life, and we workshop cases really swiftly. In that, we go through the map of the trust, the master trust, so that you can get a visual in your mind of like, where am I and where am I going and how does it all work? So, that's been helpful. We've done about 90 of those. You can find them on on Rumble under Crown Executive Orders, I think it's under.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fantastic. So I've got the web address from before. I'll pop that up again when we go. Yeah, absolutely. Would love to have you back again, Leith. Is there something you would like to leave our audience with before we end the show tonight?
Yeah, 4 words. 4. First of all, I just want to acknowledge and show respect to Clark Cho, if I'm saying that correctly, yep. Which is, there were, how far back do we want to go? For sure, that's complete respect to that. However, when we can divide it into the living and the non-living, the arrival of the corporate structure, the global corporate structure, we can then differentiate between, the arrival of those ships under a corporate structure is the beginning of the corporatization of humanity. And there was breath here before in our First Nations. But the 4 words that you want to keep top of mind are: you're not the debtor, you're the creditor, and you're not the customer, you're the custodian. So that narrows the whole thing down to just 4 words. Don't argue with an inferior jurisdiction. That is just an administration system. Don't argue with it. That's just wasting your time. Work out how it's been architected and how you interface with it effectively as your administrative tool, right? Yeah. So that's the key things to give hope to people, because people feel very overwhelmed and lost. Yep. And here's a real goodie for you. If you haven't bought XRP or XLM yet, please buy them. They are the cryptos behind gold and silver. We're coming into the quantum financial system, the asset-backed system. They will eventually spring into life. I think XLM is somewhere around 10 cents when I looked. That's silver. XRP was about 90 cents when last I looked. That is gold. And if you buy those and hold them in like a lobster wallet or something like that, you will do very well when the system flips over. So have immense hope. We are in a radical time of change. We are the change makers, humanity. We have unlimited potential to create whatever we want. And it's really exciting. So don't get lost and don't feel down and don't feel like nothing's happening. There is a lot happening.
Yep, 100%. I'm absolutely thrilled to have spoken with you tonight, Leith. I do appreciate you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Oh, 100%. And thanks to the silly Wi-Fi gods, I've had problems for the past week. So you're my very first show for a week. It's been terrible. So I'm over the moon to have you here tonight. It's been great. As we go up, I'll pop up the websites on the bottom of the screen. We're going to go out with Presence Music, Freedom Rising. I'm a huge fan of this song. Leith, once again, thanks so much. I look forward to speaking to you again, and I'm sure the audience will as well. And thanks everyone for joining us and for your wonderful comments and your questions. Make sure you stay relentless. That's all I have to say, Leith.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thanks to the audience. Lots of love and blessings. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Here's Presence Music, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
They can't divide us anymore. Freedom is rising. What is the purpose that we've come to this earth? For far too long we've suffered in silence. Now we experience a rebirth. As the cosmic clock counts down, all the more blessings we learn. No more faith in authority, media, politicians and governments, we let them burn. Stand together in the power of the magic we hold. They can't divide us anymore. When people sing the truth with the roar of a lion, and freedom is rising. They can't divide us anymore. Freedom is rising. Break free from the pain. No more living every day the same way. Caught in materialistic shame. Don't treat sacred life like a video game. And I think of our future, begin to pray. Living in a peaceful, fulfillment way. With the fall of the cabal and the sunshine, a ray of a light on us all. And it's here to stay. In this vortex we dance through our hearts. Let us pray our own part. Let our gifts shine like art. Light the path we depart. Let creation impart sacred wisdom and knowledge rain down from the stars. Stand together in the power of the magic we hold. They can't divide us anymore. When people sing the truth with the roar of a lion, and freedom is rising. They can't divide us anymore. Freedom is rising. Freedom, just lose the mind to the body, and when you become a vessel for divine flow, then your inner peace come. Intention designed to grow, and then you will see some visions that shine with the glow. And you know some ancient century, sing and dance and raise vibe and energy, mind enhancing the righteous sense that we not alone in this life. We worthy of height or sense of delight. Cherish experience of the melody, the beat in rhythm and harmony. Awaken spirit.